Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Tuesday, July 8th, 2025, episode 432, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things. First on the list is Epstein, where there is no list. I'm sure you probably have been hearing all of the news where Pam Bondi said a few months ago that the list is sitting on her desk and she's going to go through it and then tell us all what's in it, to now saying, yeah, there is no list. And it kind of reminds me of that scene in The Matrix where Neo goes, sees I forget what they call her, but the woman who is like the big algorithm in the Matrix, and like some kind of matriarch. And as he's in the waiting room, he sees this bald-headed Buddhist kid, and the kid is bending spoons. And so Neo goes next to him, and then he says, the secret is that there is no spoon. And so it kind of reminds me of that, right? You see the spoon, but it's not really there. So there is an Epstein list, but it's actually not there. So a lot of people are talking about it, and there are all those things that people are saying. A brief overview is, if there was no list, why did he commit suicide? If he was innocent and there was no evidence? If there was no list, why is Ghislaine Maxwell still in jail? Why is there no detailed explanation as to why people think that there's a list? What about the people who were trafficked, who basically saw people while they were on the island, including Clinton? And then there was that British royal who was implicated by all those videos and pictures. Why did Melinda Gates leave Bill Gates, et cetera, et cetera? We can go on forever. So to me, it means that someone got to Trump, basically leaning on him heavily. Is it because he's on the list? Maybe his children are on the list, whatever. Someone got to him, maybe his son-in-law, but someone did, and now he's under threat. And it's a big enough threat for someone who's got a bigger ego than anyone else that I know, enough for him to basically roll over. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that Trump's reactions to questions about the list is a little bit over the top. I don't know if you saw that one Q&A session where he's sitting with Pam Bondi, Marco Rubio, and then he's sitting there, right? I don't know who else was sitting at the table next to him, but I guess he was taking questions about the Texas flash flooding, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But um, so he's, I guess, taking questions about the flash flood, although it's kind of weird because Netanyahu is in town, and he's taking questions about the flash flood. But anyway, so someone asks about the Epstein list in the middle of all that, and he interrupts. The question was directed at Pam Bondi, and then he interrupts and says, how can you ask such a question at a time like this? Which was really weird. I don't know if it was just me, but I thought it was extremely out of place, especially someone who answers any question that is thrown at him, even if it's just to say you're fake news. He does entertain those questions. And so his reaction seemed a little bit over the top, which reminds me of this expression that someone once threw at me: the lady doth protest too much. And obviously, he wasn't calling me a lady, but he pro he doth protest too much. And it's a line from Hamlet. And it basically is saying that your reaction is out of place, almost to mean that you're right, right? So he's protesting, but he's admitting that there is a list. He just can't show it. And I'm wondering, because I can't be the only one who sees this, right? That there's this pattern when he just totally overreacts. It's an opposite meaning. He's not the only one. There are a lot of people in politics who are basically who talk in this way. A lot of Democrats do this as well. So that overreaction is out of place, and maybe it's a sign of something else. So I guess this also means there are no JFK files, Martin Luther King files, that the 28 pages, missing pages of the 9/11 report are also, there are no missing pages, right? So, you could go forever on this. Um, so another conclusion we can make is that if we as people are just kidding ourselves if we think that elections are anything but a placebo, right? I forget what the more precise word is, but you do it, you think it has some kind of effect, but no, there isn't. It's just something to keep us occupied, to make us feel like we're doing something. Um, so uh, it's curious that there that Mossad or Israeli intelligence, their fingerprints are all over this, right? And that's a good segue for the next topic, which is more war in Ukraine and in the Middle East, right? So Ron Paul was talking about how we are now building a brand new air base in Israel. Yeah, that's going to turn out well, right? Because Israel's real estate is so small. There's no weapon system that can stop hypersonic missiles. So we're going to build all of this for it to get blown up again. So there are some people who are very happy about getting all this money, but really the US taxpayers should be really, really upset, right? Especially since the US military is falling apart, right? Due to lack of maintenance. I saw a picture where thousands of tanks are sitting waiting to be serviced, and if you didn't know already, the main battle tank of the United States, the M1 Abrams tank, has a jet engine in it. That's what helps it to go so fast. But the problem with having these jet engines on these tanks is that they require a tremendous amount of maintenance. Just like the F-22s and the F-35s, for every hour of flight time, they require a certain amount of maintenance, hours and hours of maintenance. And so it's cool that you're flying them, but now you got to fix them up. And it takes hours and hours. No one thought about how to streamline the maintenance process, but there you have it, right? So the US military itself is falling apart. Maybe that's why they keep having proxy wars, because the US military really can't project power like it did back in the Gulf War. Um, and so all of this is going on. Also, the US is depleting all of its weapons stores, right? So anything that we have stockpiled in this country for this country is being sent and given away to Ukraine and Israel, which leaves nothing for this country. So thank goodness the US is not involved in any wars, because if if we ever did have to fight a war, we wouldn't have any munitions to be able to do it, right? So how is Netanyahu still allowed in this country? It's nuts, right? All the things that he's been doing, all the crazy things that he's done to wreck the US's foreign policy, to wreck the chances of peace. It's amazing. Especially, I mean, come on. I know I've mentioned it before, but I have to repeat it because it's just that significant. I mean, how do people buy the story that the Palestinians, that Hamas, were able to carry out its attack on October 7th? Does anyone actually believe that? That for, what, I don't know, half a day, Hamas was able to go all out, all throughout Israel without any kind of opposition? I mean, does anyone really believe that that was really possible? That the most heavily guarded border in the world just let those people in? Really? I don't know. It's impossible. Makes me think that it was on purpose, that Netanyahu ordered everyone to stand down so that the body count is as high as possible, so that it can justify an invasion of the Gaza Strip. I don't know. That's my theory, just looking at what information that is available, none of it makes sense. So this whole story of we have to get back at the Palestinians is such a bogus story. It's so weak and thin. It's unbelievable that people would actually believe it. And then they start hostilities with Iran and they get wrecked, right? They get wrecked, which is why there's so much censorship going on in Israel, right? So you might argue that, oh, yeah, a lot of Iranians died. Yeah, which is they died in what I would call atrocities, right? War crime type attacks, right? But hey, I must be in a minority to be able to say that. But the fact that Iran sent missiles, like they have over 40,000 missiles that they can send into Israel, they shot a fraction of that, right? And they didn't even and I mentioned this before, but what is it? Scott Ritter said that the missiles that they did shoot into Israel were 15 years old, right? So it's old ordnance, right? Just like the United States is trying to clear out all of its old stockpiles, right? Well, that's what Iran was doing, right? Before they touch the good stuff, they're going to go through the old stuff. But even the old stuff couldn't be stopped by Israel. And so I don't know. I think it's just kind of it's ridiculous. There's all of this that's happening. And the only reason why Israel is still on the map, that Iran didn't just totally wipe it off the face of the planet, is because Israel would use its nukes, right? Supposedly, no one's supposed to know that Israel has like 200 nukes, right? But they do, right? No one's allowed to have it. America's not supposed to give military aid to a country that has nukes, but hey, Israel controls America, so why not? And the fact that Israel threatens other countries with its nukes, wink, wink, and it only incentivizes other countries to get nukes. And it's just kind of interesting that Iran has refrained from getting nukes in spite of the fact that everyone knows uh, the situation. Also, Ukraine, Trump came out today and announced that they're going to send more weapons to Ukraine. And he said, well, they need weapons to defend themselves. Well, look, if the war ended, they wouldn't need weapons to defend themselves, right? And to supply weapons to the one side and then pretend to have negotiations with Russia, it's a joke, right? America is a joke. That's why America and Americans who defend this government, this regime, it's a joke, right? People are laughing at us because of this, right? It's just so ridiculous, so absurd, and it just kind of so frustrating that we have to live in a country with a government that's elected in this way, or because of the process that exists, and so we become a laughing stock. I mean, we are such a joke. It's not even funny. And the only reason why people aren't more open about their mocking of the United States is because of the nukes, right? That's the thing. It's always that. And since the United States is the only country in the world to ever use nukes against another country, well, people always have that in the back of their heads. So the United States pretends to negotiate, pretends to want peace, but the whole time they're lying, right? And so what Trump is doing is basically pushing away all of the people who voted for him by not doing the things that he had promised. And the reality is that the United States can't afford this. There are not enough weapons in the United States. The weapons aren't the best anymore. Iran, as I said, didn't even use the good stuff against Israel. Uh, there's no money for this, right? I was watching, I believe, either Menaco 64 or Vince Lanci on Arcade Economics, where they were saying that the percentage of treasuries that foreign governments hold is dropping, right? So like 10 years ago, it was 70% of foreign what is it? Foreign exchange reserves, foreign reserves, exchange reserve. I forget what the expression that is made up of U.S. Treasuries was over 70%. A few years ago, it was 50%, or excuse me, to now where it's less than 50%, right? So people are dumping dollars. This is not good for the United States. Trump is not helping matters by threatening everyone in the world. So we get what we deserve because this is the government that we have allowed to rule over us. And at the same time, BRICS is getting stronger. All of the BRIC nations is accumulating gold. But of course, because of the gold frenzy in these other countries, you start seeing fraud scams, cons, Ponzi schemes. So I'll keep an eye out on that. And to top it off, Netanyahu nominates Trump for the Peace Prize. Yeah. Israel, that basically has been, no one sides with Israel except the United States. But I guess their word has a lot of power. I'm joking. That was sarcastic. That was sarcasm, right? Netanyahu, who has an arrest warrant out on him, he's going to propose that Trump gets a peace prize. And he only said that because he knows that Trump eats that stuff up, right? Just talk about brown nosing, sucking up to someone. But there it is. I really wanted to talk about insurance, though, and I mentioned yesterday that I was going to talk about insurance. So let's talk about insurance. Now, people in the United States have been socialized to hate insurance companies, but in reality, they perform a valuable function. A lot of people believe that even Christopher Columbus had insurance when he set sail to find Asia, right? To find China or India, and ended up in North America or the Caribbean, to be more precise. But he had insurance. Those ships had to be insured. What happens if he lost all the ships? What happens if nothing comes of the expedition? What happens to all of the money that people invested in his adventure? Right. So even he had insurance, right? And so the payoff of buying the insurance is whatever he discovers, perhaps gold. Fast forward to today, to 2010. Some of you may remember the BP British Petroleum oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. You had tar balls, right? So basically, after the oil has been in the water for a certain amount of time, they turn into tar balls. And even up in New Jersey, you would get tar balls from the Gulf of Mexico, right? That's how far up the oil spill went. And it was a nightmare. It was horrible. And people say it was capitalism. No, it was an insurance problem, right? And I've talked about this before, I'm sure, but just to summarize it very, very quickly, um, basically, the U.S. had drilling licenses for the Gulf of Mexico, but no one was buying them. And so they inquired as to why none of these oil companies wanted to drill in the Gulf of Mexico. There's so much oil in there. And they said, well, the problem is that it's a mile deep, right? So in order to start drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, you have to drill a mile down. So the water is a mile deep. And by the time you get that deep, the water is so cold that if there is a break, if there is a leak a mile down, there would be no way to stop it. And because there's no way to stop it, they can't get insurance. So an oil drilling platform at the time is $4 billion. Well, you got to protect your investment, right? What if something goes wrong? So you get insurance. But the insurance companies come out and they ask a bunch of questions. They look at the designs and say, oh, good, good, good. And then they say, what do you do if there's a leak a mile down in the ocean, in the Gulf? And they say, we have no way of stopping a leak a mile down. And that's when they say, okay, your liability is infinite. In other words, the amount of damage that you could cause as a result of a leak a mile down in the Gulf of Mexico is infinite, right? We're not talking trillions, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars, right? Infinite. right? So basically, the sky is the limit in terms of how much damage they would have to pay out. If an insurance company tried to cover that, they would go bankrupt trying, right? They wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface of covering all of the claims of property damage as a result of all of that oil that spilled everywhere. So they say, we can't cover you, can't give you insurance. Well, no one is going to buy a $4 billion oil rig and set it up without any insurance. And so basically, that's the story they told the government. They said, we can't drill because we can't get insurance. And so the government says, oh, that's the problem. So they wrote a law. It's the 1990 Oil Pollution Act, where they, oh, sorry. Oh, I'm getting these emergency weather notice notifications. Sorry about that. But anyway, the 1990 Oil Pollution Act, which capped liability to $75 million, which is chump change, right? It's nothing. And so once the insurance company said, oh, that's all we would ever have to pay out, $75 million, even if there's an unstoppable oil leak a mile down in the Gulf of Mexico, okay, well, based on that, we can tell you how much you'd have to pay in terms of an insurance premium. And once that was established, a $75 million cap on damages that could be filed against an oil company, everyone started drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. You see, because now liability, right, the amount of money you'd have to pay out went from infinity to 75 million, right? It's nothing. And so that's why everyone started drilling there. That's why when there was a leak, they couldn't stop it. And the reason why they were drilling in the first place was because they were able to get insurance, and they were able to get insurance because the government wrote a law creating the circumstances where now oil companies can get insurance. That takes us to the next story, which is the Texas flash floods, right? Just basically, it's pouring like crazy right now. All of a sudden, the skies just opened up. And so you're going to have flash floods. We even get flash floods around here as well, but everyone knows where the flooding happens, right? So everyone kind of, if you've been living here for any kind of time, you know where the flooding will generally be. So you know that if you built a house right in the flood zone, that you will most likely lose that house sooner or later. But the situation is the same. No one wants to build in a flood-prone zone. If you're going to build on a place where it's probable, almost guaranteed that within 10 years you're going to have a major flood there, you're not going to build there. And so then the government says, why aren't you building there? And people say, well, we can't get insurance because it's a flood prone zone. And so then the government says, oh, that's the problem? Well, we'll force insurance companies to pretend to give you insurance. And so insurance companies, which otherwise would not offer insurance, right? Now they're forced to pretend to offer insurance. And so then people build there. And so then comes the flood, and you see a tremendous amount of damage. People get upset with the insurance companies because they don't want to pay out, right? Because they had a unwritten backroom guarantee from the government that the government through FEMA would cover all of their expenses. So they just sit and wait, and they're willing to take all of that heat, the hate from the people, because they would go bankrupt otherwise. Okay, I hope you understand how that scam works. It's not necessarily the insurance company, but it's the fascistic, right? The fascist behavior of the government to force insurance companies to pretend that they're giving insurance. Health insurance is very similar to this too, right? People complain about health insurance. Well, look, health insurance companies don't want to cover sick people, right? Because they'd have to pay out. There's no way they can profit from that. And so what you want then is to incentivize people to be healthier, right? So health insurance companies should be in charge of drug testing. Health insurance companies should be in charge of food, diet, healthy diet determination, not the government, health insurance companies. And the better and healthier that you're living, the lower your insurance premium would be. right? And so basically, when you sign up for coverage, they do give you a physical examination to try to see the likelihood that they would have to pay for, operations or whatever. Now, you might think that this is unfair, but you have to keep in mind that hospital costs, medical costs, are only high because the government regulates healthcare as a whole, and it reduces competition and drives up costs, right? So, so you would have to try to be healthier in order to have a lower premium and also to get a higher payout if something ever does go wrong. So why don't we have this in place anymore? Well, because people call it racist. People call it body shaming, right? Whatever. They use any old excuse. A knowledge production is what I usually call it, in order to prevent what needs to be done and then to have a politicized, subjective morality then governing how insurance companies should cover people. And then when everything goes sideways, people complain and they say, "Oh, it's all your fault." No, it's not. It's all those people you wanted to believe who told you it was racist or body shaming is not good. You shouldn't do it, right? So all of this, right, is could have been prevented, but no, we just believe the propaganda. We believe and trust liars, right? Even look at the big pharma companies. They were released from liability before all the corona jabs were released, right? And they wouldn't release them until they got that you're not allowed to sue them guarantee, right? So insurance companies perform a vital function. They probably are more honest than most corporations that you would know. But now that the government has taken over the insurance industry, there are so many rules and regulations that they generally end up taking all the heat that belongs to politicians. Yet another reason to hate the government. And that's it for, so basically the solution always is roll back the government control over everything, rediscover our freedom, and then start seeing solutions and life getting a lot better. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.